So I'm here working at the retreat and I need to stop and make some lunch. Now this is an issue as much as when you're really busy. For example, I come here, I've only got one night, I've got to do a lot of work. And it's also the same when you're meditating. You can't afford to spend too much time cooking food, otherwise you run out of time in your work or in your practice. And it's a big issue in retreat. If you can go into a proper retreat, then you'll have somebody cooking for you and providing the food. You don't need to worry about it. But people who are practicing on their own, then they have to find systems or ways in which they can reduce the mundane activities and put more time to their practice. Well, here I'm not really practicing. Here I'm trying to build a shed for the sawmill. But again, I've only got a few hours every day, and so I've got to do something simple. So now I'm going to make a super simple pasta. So what I've got is I've got a bit of garlic, some mushrooms, a white onion, a bit of extra virgin olive oil. Now I'm going to use a tin of tomatoes. It'd be much nicer if you had some Italian plum tomatoes, but this is quite a good tin. It doesn't have any additives. I'm going to use that. It's going to be quicker. Really, there's always the temptation to go overboard and do something really fancy, right? But as I said, it's not something you can afford to do if you want to get a lot of practice done. I mean, Milarepa basically lived on stinging nettles. And the reason why Milarepa lived on stinging nettles is because he had no way of providing for himself. And he didn't want to waste his time going out begging for money or begging for food. He just wanted to stay in practice. And so he had a really meager diet. This is also the case in the Zen tradition. For example, the Korean Zen monks, then they go on retreat and they eat pine needles because there's pine trees growing everywhere, right? All over the place in Korea. And there's an interesting story about that. There was a Korean monk and his friend, and they were doing a traditional retreat for 1 year or something like that. And they were just living on pine needles. They make tea or soup out of the pine needles. It's a very meager diet, but it will sustain you for a certain amount of time. And when they finished the retreat, then they came back down out of the mountain. And a village woman, a farmer, saw these two Buddhist monks coming down out of the mountain, out of the retreat. And of course they have great faith in the mendicants in Korea. So she wanted to offer them a meal. And if you know anything about Koreans, then they absolutely love their food. They really, really take their food seriously. In fact, in the Korean monasteries, then there is often trouble. If the food isn't good, of good quality and tasty, then sometimes the monks rebel. And because Koreans take food so seriously, then the person who's in charge of the kitchen, kind of the head chef, I suppose, has the second highest position in the monastery, which sounds odd. It sounds odd in the Tibetan tradition. For example, in Nepal where I was, then the cook is one of the lowest positions in the monastery. In fact, it's usually a Nepali layperson who gets a very low wage. They don't take the food that seriously, but Koreans do. So there was this senior monk and his friend. They came out of the mountain, and the woman offered them a really lavish feast and really went overboard. The thing is, if you've been practicing in this way and eating a meager diet, then it's really important that you sort of transition back into normal food very slowly, because it's quite dangerous. But the monk's friend, the guy who was with him, was getting a bit carried away, and he warned him. He warned him to go slowly and not to eat too much. But the food was so delicious, and he had such great attachment to it that he stuffed himself with it. And what happened in the end is that his friend actually died from gastric block or something, because his body hadn't been used to eating rich food, only been living on pine needles. And an interesting part of the story is that even after doing intensive practice for a year or more than a year, and practicing like an ascetic, then this guy still had really strong clinging to food. He hadn't overcome his attachment. And it goes to show how important habituation is on the Buddhist path. That even if we have a high level of practice, even if we practice with intensity in a retreat situation, then it takes time to overcome one's clinging to the mundane world, one's anger, jealousy, pride, all those sorts of things. And so when I hear Westerners claim that in, a matter of a few weeks, they achieve Kensho or awakening without really having applied themselves to anything, then it makes me kind of laugh. But it's clear that they haven't actually accomplished anything in their practice. Their practice obviously made them feel a little bit better, but when you get results from practice, what happens is that your kleshas, your negative emotions, reduce. You become more humble and a more tamed individual. So, regardless of how high your view is, then you still have to be diligent. And although it says there's no meditation, there's nothing to do, that really for most of us, we've got a lot of work to do. And the reason why we've got a lot of work to do isn't related in any way to the ultimate truth. The ultimate truth is fine the way it is. It's not going anywhere. It's got to do with the strength of our own negative emotions and whether or not we fall sway under these. I wonder if this can opener works. So anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, about being in retreat. So when you're practicing, you need to find simple ways of living, especially if you're looking after yourself. What I used to do when I was doing home retreat is I would just make like a lentil soup or something. I would make a big pot of lentils and some rice, and that could last for about 3 days. Of course, there's not a lot of variation, right? It's not like you're getting something different every meal. But it doesn't matter if you want to meditate all the time. All you need is sustenance. But you do have to look after yourself. You do have to feed yourself well. A big mistake many people make when they start meditating is they want to pretend they're like some kind of advanced yogi, and they starve themselves to death or damage their health and trying to emulate the masters of the past. A bit of olive oil in there. But really what you need to do is make sure you get good, healthy, nutritious food. You don't need a lot because you're sitting all day long. And then don't worry about fancy stuff. I notice the main thing that most people have when they go into retreat is an addiction to coffee. Or coffee and chocolate, I think, were the two strongest things. It's fine if you can get it right. But if you're in retreat up the side of a mountain and your coffee runs out and your chocolate runs out and you become habituated to it, then you're going to start thinking of how you're going to get it. I mean, I met somebody like this in India. I'd been practicing in the Tsopema caves in India, this place where Guru Rinpoche was. And I was a tourist. I was sitting in a restaurant called Nima's Blue Cave or something like that. In those days, the Nima, the woman, Tibetan woman, still owned the place. Last time I went there, it was owned by Indians. And he said, "Oh, Nima, I just had to come down out of the mountain. I mean, I wanted to stay there and practice, but I ran out of coffee and I had no choice." Right? So it just shows. Basically, I'm fine up there meditating in my cave, but if I run out of coffee or chocolate, I'm finished. So it doesn't pay to have these kind of addictions. There's a kind of strong clinging to these things, because then that will take you out of your retreat. And then when you start running out of chocolate, you're going to be thinking, wow, I've only got one bar left. In a couple of days, it'll be gone. What am I going to do, right? Really, what we need is, we need the right kind of conditions for practice. And that means we need less distraction, worldly distraction. And food, cooking, treating ourselves is just that kind of distraction. And it's a real problem when you're doing home retreat in like America, for example, or Europe. Because we have everything we want, you know? You can order whatever you like online from Amazon. And in Canada, for example, you can always order a Domino's pizza. So when you're sitting on your cushion trying to meditate, and you start thinking, ooh, I'd quite like some sushi, then you're not meditating, right? In fact, you're doing the opposite of meditating. Because you're feeding your desire. And then when you don't get what you want, you're feeding your anger. So I'm just going to sort of soften the onions a little bit. Fried in some extra virgin olive oil. Actually, there's a very nice pasta sauce you can make. Just tomatoes and lots of garlic. And you just slowly cook them together with some salt. Quite a bit of salt, really, you know. And then when it's nicely infused with the taste of garlic, you can just blend the whole thing. Makes a really nice tomato sauce. But today I decided I'd have a bit of onion and mushrooms, some organic mushrooms. So if we're sitting on a cushion and all we're doing is giving rise to negative emotions, that is not practice. It's fine if we're giving rise to negative emotions and then we're dealing with them some way, either by abandonment, transformation, or recognition, the three methods for transformation of the mind. But if we're just sitting there getting pissed off, then we're wasting our time, right? So you need conducive conditions for practice. That means less distraction. Out here, it's easy, right? There's nobody around. It's a completely quiet place. And there's no pizza shops. There's nothing open at night. There's no street lights. There's nobody around making noise. Probably in summer, occasionally. It's a bit busy with tourists. You can probably hear someone having a rave maybe in the distance. It's quite rare. And in general, then the yogis of the past, they always went off into the wilderness, right? Off to caves, lakes, islands, places where they wouldn't see other people, especially places where they wouldn't give rise to the kleshas, like desire. And when you're in the busy city, with all the things that a city has to offer, entertainment, distraction, movies, and your mind is never able to settle. Of course, eventually, you need to be able to meditate in any situation. And this is what happened in the past. In the past, then the meditators would go off to the cave until they felt they achieved some stability in their practice. Until some feeling of no self and emptiness would arise. And then they would intentionally go down into the busy marketplace to check themselves out, to see if they're getting results in their practice, and engage in strange conduct. For example, they would run around the street naked and act like a madman. And then, of course, when the villagers started throwing stones at them and hurling abuse, then they had something to gauge their practice by. And if, for example, they became embarrassed or upset because of the derision of the villagers, then they would know, my practice isn't going well, and then return to the mountainside to try again. This going down to the marketplace isn't for everyone. It's quite a difficult practice. We have such a strong habituation for not wanting to be seen to be different. We want to blend in with the crowd. We want a social and cultural camouflage to hide our difference. We teach ourselves small talk and how to act normal in society. And it's all because of this, our strong self-clinging. Practice is about eliminating clinging, and especially self-clinging, self-identification. And so for that, then we need to practice. That's what's called meditation. Meditation isn't about sitting on your cushion and being quiet. There are many different forms of meditation. And sitting quietly is just one of them. Also, acting like a madman in the marketplace is also a form of meditation. The term meditation in Sanskrit and in Tibetan means to cultivate, like to train, habituate yourself, familiarize yourself with a new way of thinking, a new way of being. And like I say, for that there are many different methods. So I'm going to put a little bit of chili in there. I can't help it. I'm very attached to chili. It's no good for me. It's not good for my health. I'm too old now. I can't eat this sort of stuff. I'll just put a little bit in. Give it some flavor. I don't have any herbs. I'm going to have to add some salt to that. Like I say, tomato sauce needs quite a bit of salt. Bit of salt, bit of pepper. When the retreat is running, we'll have fresh herbs, basil, and all sorts of things growing here. Right now, living out of tins. It's okay for now. So, I sauteed the onions and added the garlic and the mushrooms. Give them a bit of color. Add the tomatoes, some salt, some chili, black pepper. Now I'm just gonna bring that to a boil and then put it on a low simmer and get back to work and finish making the braces for the sawmill shed. Okay, I better get on with it. I'll see you later. Well, there you go. Voila! Spaghetti al funghi. Let's see what it tastes like. A bit of shaved Parmesan on top. Nice. I mean, it's just bachelor food. It's nothing fancy. Actually, it's pretty tasty. Just the right amount of spice. Is it sacrilege to use chopsticks to eat pasta? Okay, I'm gonna get out my lunch. Then I gotta get back to work. Enjoy. You need carbohydrates when you're working.